Anytime, anywhere. ABC News Now. Start here.
Good evening and welcome to 2020. Tonight, happiness. What wouldn't you give for it? But can you get it for free? Are you born with it? Is it in your DNA?
Yes, actually, it is. But you can also create more of it for yourself, no matter who your parents were. Trying to find happiness is the search of a lifetime, but in just this 1 hour, we're going to give you the experts' thoughts on what you can do to make a difference in your life. Here's Bill Weir in Pursuit of Happiness.
Welcome to our little happy hour. Thanks for joining us. And we start tonight with an obvious question. Would you like to be happier? Of course you would. You're human, and this is America. Our pursuit of happiness is guaranteed in the Declaration of Independence, and the Founding Fathers even capitalized the H. This is truly the land of the happy hour and the happy meal, the smiley face and the laugh track. Happiness committees are popping up across corporate America, while positive psychology becomes the most popular course on campus and a best-selling topic in bookstores. So when it comes to happiness, we are all in full pursuit. But can it be caught and held? Can it actually be measured, studied, and nurtured? After a decade of brain scans and global surveys, new science says yes. And sprinkled around this room are people who represent 6 fundamental theories on the pursuit of happiness. Just like you, they all know exactly what would bring them lasting joy. Or do they? Some want to have kids or win the lottery. He wants a promotion. She wants those Prada shoes. Jacqueline here is firmly convinced she'll be much happier after she has this lovely flower tattooed on her side. While Donna over here is convinced she'll be much happier after she has this zodiac tattoo removed from her arm. Now, somewhere between the needle of anticipation and the laser of regret, happiness does exist, but it never lasts for long. And you can blame the little chunk of brain right above your eyes. It is called the frontal lobe, and it gives us the ability to imagine, plan, and fantasize, skills that brought us the glories of skyscrapers and space travel and beer helmets. But in the long history of human evolution, this chunk of brain is a relatively new tool. And as Yale professor and Stumbling on Happiness author Dan Gilbert tells us, we're still figuring out how it works.
Imagination can fail you. It can play tricks. The future you imagine is not always the future in which you're going to find yourself.
Like Donna here, who never imagined she'd be a professional embarrassed of her tattoo. So number 1, it is impossible to predict future happiness, because number 2, society often tricks us. For example, society and our own genes tell us to grow up and have our own bundles of joy. But research has shown that having children won't make you any happier. Having teenage children will make you miserable. 900 moms in Texas were asked to record the activities that make them happy moment by moment each day. Socializing, praying, sex, and television topped the list. Parenting came in right around housework. See, our brains remember the highs of first steps and warm hugs, but they forget the lows of diapers and tantrums. This selective memory keeps us breathing and keeps the economy humming. Magazines, billboards, television all bombard us with promises of a happier life through cheese slices, mid-sized sedans, and diamond tennis bracelets. These are promises that build up the biggest happiness mirage of all, money.
Money buys you happiness if A, you spend it right, B, you don't have very much of it to start with, and C, you have more of it than all the people you know.
In other words, people need just enough money to feel confident within their own tribe. But in the tribe that is America, there is always someone worth way more than you. Like Thayer Willis, an heiress to the Georgia Pacific timber fortune, who grew up in fabulous splendor.
And I was miserable. Being happy, it doesn't have to do with what we have. It has to do with how we live our lives.
Thayer now counsels families that are very rich and very sad, and among her advice, find meaningful work. Sean Aiken can relate to that advice. He has worked 43 different jobs in the past 43 weeks, part of a year-long quest to raise money for charity and find his bliss. He really liked being a brewmaster, dairy farmer, and bungee instructor, but he hated selling stuff at trade shows. Sean also teaches us the third fundamental, which is it doesn't matter what you do, but rather who you do it with, right?
Yeah, that's right. You know, each week I'm constantly asking people what do they like most about their jobs. And a really common answer that I receive is it's the people that they work with. But it's the people and the relationships they have developed that keep bringing them back there every day.
Good lesson to learn. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Have a drink on me, will you?
Thanks.
Now, positive psychologists break down the workforce into those with jobs, careers, and callings. The happiest are those who follow their calling. But right behind them are those who use sheer will to turn their job into a calling, like Paul here. He's happy, which is amazing when you consider he is a New York City cab driver. For 12 hours a day, he fights some of the world's worst traffic and deals with some of the world's most stressed out people.
Elizabeth and Houston.
But through it all, Paul forces himself to be positive. He tells corny jokes and gives thank you cards.
That way you have more of a positive day, a positive week, and a positive life.
Thank you.
You're a great guy.
His reward? Higher tips and happier shifts. Paul represents the theory that happiness is a choice, that you can actually force positive changes in your brain. We'll have a lot more on that later in the show. But our fifth fundamental is easier to come by, because if you can find an activity you truly love, then you can find flow. Flow is that transcendent state when a person becomes so engaged in their passion they lose all sense of themselves. And it could come from a million different activities: talking, knitting, teaching, surfing. Jonas Gerard finds his with a brush, paint, and canvas.
I've had horrible toothaches recently, and the pain is horrible. I come here, the pain goes away.
Really?
I forget about a lot of things when I'm in this flow. When I'm into it, it could be 3 or 4 paintings in just one night. Because when it's happening, it's just the magic moments. You can't stop it. Can you stop a train? That's it.
Now, Jonas is lucky because his flow activity actually makes other people happy. It's the best kind of flow. And Charlie Todd, you can relate to that, right?
I sure can.
Yeah. He finds flow and makes others happy by shocking complete strangers. This is him and a few dozen friends going for a winter subway ride without pants. His group is called Improv Everywhere, and they stage elaborate stunts with the simple goal of brightening the lives of strangers.
I try to do pranks about making people happy, making someone's day, giving someone an awesome experience.
This is one of their mock wedding proposals. Always a crowd favorite. And it brings us to our final fundamental of happiness.
If you could only know one thing to understand human beings, it would be this. Human beings are social animals. Almost every one of our greatest sources of joy is a social source of joy. Something about our interaction with or relationship with another person.
And with that, we begin our quest for the where, what, and how of happiness. Fort Stewart, Georgia, and the 3rd Infantry Division is home at last. This is just one example of what true happiness looks like from the outside. But what's happening inside the brains of these people?
It's a very complicated chemical soup.
Happiness soup.
In some sense. The images will start in...
Dr. Richard Davidson has made a life's work out of studying happy brains. His lab at the University of Wisconsin is devoted to understanding how much of our joy level is set at birth,
like a trip to the beauty parlor,
and how much we can control.
Have a beautiful signal.
Good.
Your head is made for this, I guess.
Right, great. Glad to know it's made for something.
With an attractive skull cap containing 128 sensors, Davidson's team can watch my brain respond to a series of photographs. Some pleasant, some distressing. By studying the activity in my left prefrontal cortex, Dr. Davidson discovers, much to my surprise,
that was great.
I have a happy brain.
Is that so? More positive than not?
Yes, more positive than not. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't have episodes of negative emotion, but those negative emotions don't linger.
He explained that I have my parents to thank, not only for happy genes, but also a loving childhood. Studies have shown that angry or critical parents can actually alter a child's happiness level until it's set about age 16. But can adults adjust their own feelings of happiness? University of California psychology professor Dr. Sonja Lyubomirsky says yes. And on the cover of her new book, The How of Happiness, she slices your overall joy like a pie. The big slice, half the pie, is set by your genes, while this sliver, just 10%, comes from life circumstances, where you live, how much money you make, even how you look. If it seems like these factors should make up much more of the pie, meet Caroline Johnson. 4 years ago, she volunteered for the ABC show Extreme Makeover.
Her broken nose is straightened, her upper lip lowered, reshaped.
You get all this amazing plastic surgery. Did it make you happier?
I think about a year it made a difference. People are seeing you for the first time and they compliment you all the time. And then once all that wears off, it's just normal life again.
Like Caroline, most people eventually return to their happiness set point after big changes in life. Researchers have even noticed this in lottery winners and newlyweds, which is why Dr. Lyubomirsky says life circumstances only account for 10% of total happiness. And that leaves a big piece of pie, one she says you can control.
That 40% is left for the intentional activities that we can choose to engage in, the things that we do and think every day of our lives. By those things, we can increase or decrease our happiness.
Caroline makes an ideal test case for this 40% theory because she has an identical twin named Kat. Kat and Caroline share the same genes, the same upbringing, they live in the same area, and like her sister, Kat also had an extreme makeover. But when Dr. Lyubomirsky gave them both questionnaires designed to measure their levels of happiness, Caroline rated above average,
5.5, got that, out of 7.
While Kat scored very low, borderline miserable.
That's a 3 1/4.
It was striking how different you two are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty stunning gap. Wow. You are much happier than you are.
Thank you. No, I'm just kidding.
Does that surprise you?
I had already assumed that she's happier than I am.
Caroline, the happy twin, is a married mother of 3 boys and a self-employed dog groomer.
Abby.
Her business has hit a rough patch lately.
Good girl.
How's your business doing?
You know what? It's good. It's slow. So cute.
Are you optimistic?
I'm very optimistic. I have goals. I know where I want to be by next summer. I have definite goals that I expect to meet.
Kat, the unhappy twin, is a single mother, supporting her 7-year-old as a hairstylist. And she has a completely different outlook on the future.
I don't feel like I'm progressing as much as I want to in my job or just the financial situation. So a lot of times that it just feels like it just weighs on me too much and I just feel like I'm not going to get out of it.
We have the next appointment scheduled?
And here we really see major differences between the level of optimism that they have, Caroline being more optimistic, more sort of committed to pursuing life goals.
So optimism and pursuing life goals are 2 qualities of happy people. A third is the ability to nurture meaningful relationships. While Caroline has her husband, Kat struggles with the dating scene.
I don't have somebody that can just hold me, because I'm having a hard time.
What are you looking for in a guy?
I don't know. I feel like I'm totally giving up on all that.
Is she too picky?
She's very picky. They're going to look different in 10 years. It doesn't matter what they look like.
While Kat blames her unhappiness on the struggles of single motherhood, Dr. Lyubomirsky says it's not her circumstances, but her attitude.
It's such a fascinating case because they're identical twins. So we know that their differences in happiness can be explained by genetics.
It's their outlook, it's what they do.
Exactly.
And Dr. Davidson would agree. He has studied the brains of Buddhist monks, men who spend their lives deliberately forcing positive emotions, and their happiness is off the charts. His new data claims that if a person sits quietly for a half hour a day, just thinking about kindness and compassion, their brain will show noticeable changes in just 2 weeks.
In many ways, this is the most important idea in neuroscience in the last decade. Our brains are just waiting to be transformed, and they're always being transformed. But we can take responsibility and change the brain in more positive ways.
And Dr. Lyubomirsky says there are many more strategies.
Gratitude, forgiveness, relationships, savoring the present moment.
She admits they sound corny and old-fashioned, but grandmotherly advice like count your blessings now has scientific research to back it up.
But can you force those emotions? Can you force yourself to be more grateful, to be more compassionate.
Research is showing pretty convincingly now that happiness is really within us. It's not outside of us. It's in what we do. It's sort of how we act, how we think every day of our lives.
Mwah. Love you. Love you too. Okay, have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
And now a search for the happiest place on Earth. Disneyland claims that distinction, of course, but with all due respect, we wanted someplace where the mice don't talk. Someplace where real people face the daily grind, but are somehow nudged by their surroundings, their values, their government, into becoming the most content society on the planet. Well, we found it. But where it is and how they live might just surprise you. When you imagine the happiest place on Earth, you might pick a spot with warm sand and soft breezes. A sun-kissed vineyard, perhaps, or a Mediterranean village. If asked to name the happiest country on Earth, you might choose this one, land of the free, home of the brave. But when you let go of patriotic pride and travel brochure fantasy, when you use social science to rank 178 nations, a paradise like Fiji comes in more than 50 spots below Iceland. And for all their style and cuisine, France and Italy rank well below Canada. And while we may be #1 in wealth and power, when it comes to happiness, the good old USA is number 23. How do we know? Well, for the past decade, social scientists and pollsters have given elaborate questionnaires to hundreds of thousands of people around the globe.
The answer you get is not only how they feel right now, but it's also about how they feel about their entire life.
Dan Buettner is the founder of Blue Zones, a project that studies happiness and longevity around the world. He says that if you mine all the databases of universities and research centers, you will find that the happiest place on Earth is Denmark. Cold, dreary, unspectacular Denmark, where stoic locals wear sensible shoes and snack on herring sandwiches. Sure, they produce the occasional supermodel, but their most famous countryman is Victor Borge. Could they really be the happiest in the world?
On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you?
8.
About 8.
8, I guess. Right now, I'm probably like 9.
7, I suppose.
8, I think.
An 8?
Yeah.
9.5. 9.5.
10.
It went on like this most of the morning, until finally, a grouchy Dane.
I think it's the biggest lie in the world that the Danes should be so happy, because they're not.
But when pressed, even Miss Pottymouth slipped into gratitude.
I'm content. Like she said, most Danes, we have no reasons to complain.
Well, they do have one complaint. In fact, I heard it from a couple people. Taxes. Yes, the happiest people in the world pay some of the highest taxes in the world, up to 63% of their income. In exchange, the government covers all health care and education and spends more on children and the elderly per capita than any other nation in the world. With just 5.5 million people, the system is efficient, and people feel toiket, the Danish word for tucked in, like a snug child.
You feel taken care of?
Yes.
Now, the politically incorrect truth is that Denmark has very little diversity. 9 in 10 are full-blooded Danes. 8 in 10 are Lutherans. Of course, happiness can exist in melting pots like America, but social scientists point out that higher taxes are easier to pay if you know the money is going to someone who looks and thinks like you. Those high taxes have another effect. Since a banker ends up taking home about as much as an artist, people don't choose careers based on income or status.
We see people quit their job because, no, I want to do something that I really, really like.
They have this thing called Jantelaw, which essentially says that you're no better than anybody else. A garbage man can live in a middle-class neighborhood and hold his head high.
Well, let's find a garbage man. His name is Jan, and he says he took this job because he only has to work 5 hours in the morning, and then spends the rest of the day with family or coaching his daughter's handball team. Danes really love handball. But Jan also says he really loves being a garbage man, and no one judges his choice of career.
When we come and say hello, that makes other people happy. And smile is a good thing. The old ladies give us a little cup of coffee. That's happy.
You're not just collecting garbage, you're spreading happiness.
Yes.
In this job.
Yes. If I'm happy, the people are happy.
Joseph is another example of Danish status. He is a carpenter's apprentice.
What is it you enjoy?
I think it's the thing about building something. When you work the whole day and you can see what you've done.
On weekends, he likes to fish and hunt.
Yeah.
And play with his new puppy. Oh, and that castle over there? That belongs to his family. He also happens to be a prince.
So who is this handsome gentleman?
It's my great-great-grandfather.
Yes, Joseph is a descendant of the Danish king, related to the royal houses of France and Spain. And again, he's chosen to be a carpenter's apprentice and rarely discusses his lineage with anyone.
You couldn't ask for a greater opening line with the ladies than, I'm royalty. Don't you ever use that?
No, never.
Come on. Well, that's wasted, man.
I know, a lot of people say that. It's better if they found out themselves, then it works even better.
Joseph invited us over for a Danish tradition called hygge. Cozy, intimate, spontaneous gatherings with neighbors and family. Emotional insulation against the long winter. And hanging out with other Danes may just be their happiness secret. 92% belong to dancing clubs or singing clubs, even laughing club. Get a few people together who enjoy cold water swimming or model train building, and the government will pay for it. Yes, in Denmark, even friendship is subsidized. And this is what is called a post-consumerist society. People here have nice things, but shopping, consuming, it's not a priority.
I can't get over the fact that this is the smallest 7-Eleven sign on the planet. Even the advertising is self-effacing.
And with less emphasis on personal possessions and a strong social fabric, Danes also display an amazing level of trust in each other and their government.
Did you notice when you walked in the country, there was no long lines?
They didn't even check my passport.
Yeah.
Literally.
You look like a nice guy. Come on through.
Vegetable stands run on the honor system. Mothers leave babies in strollers, unattended outside cafes, and most bicycles are unlocked. And now that I think about it, the bicycle may be the best symbol of Danish happiness. They can all afford cars, but they choose bikes. Simple, economical, non-polluting machines that show no status and help keep people fit.
You have a good society that takes care of you. And mainly, people are good to each other. You can live your life, so it's a good place to be.
If you set out across this blue marble of ours and talk to a few of the 6.5 billion people who live here, you will be amazed by the pockets of joy you find in the most unlikely places. I've met happy mothers in the dusty villages of Africa, happy Tibetans toiling under Chinese oppression, happy families in the slums of Bombay. To understand this sort of human contentment, Dan Buettner founded a global project called Blue Zones. He showed us how a liberal, tolerant, democratic society helps make Denmark the happiest country in the world. But could we find similar contentment in a place with one political party, a censored press, and no jury trials? A place with the highest execution rate in the world? Welcome to Singapore, the happiest country in Asia.
95% of the people around us say they're either somewhat happy or very happy. That's a very high proportion for Asia.
That was not the case 40 years ago, when a man named Lee Kuan Yew took power and laid down the law. He banned spitting, chewing gum, and long hair, and even paid educated people to breed. With his draconian laws, he transformed Singapore from a smelly, chaotic seaport into one of the richest, cleanest, safest, and most efficient big cities in the world. But it is still the kind of nanny state where the warning on a cigarette pack is a color photo of cancer. And woe unto those who litter or forget to flush.
Just follow the rules. Here is based on the rules. Rules and very systematic country.
There are fines for the smallest infractions, and more serious criminals are strapped to a rack and beaten with a bamboo cane.
Were you ever caned?
Oh, yes, many times.
Describe that. What's that like?
Oh, it was a horrible, painful experience.
After serving 15 years for gang crimes, Neville Tan is now a pastor with a prison ministry. He has seen and felt Singaporean justice, and he doesn't mind it one bit.
We feel safe. We don't break the law. If we stay within the law, we don't have to worry about the law. I've been in America and I know people can get away with anything. I find there's too much freedom.
These people have different values than we do. For them, security and orderliness and cleanliness are very important.
Asians in general don't really step out of bounds too often.
Mark Z is from Apple Valley, Minnesota. On a visit to Singapore, he fell into an acting career, moved here, and says he had no problems giving up American-style civil liberties in exchange for a clean, safe city.
They're the highest paid civil servants in the world. And so you get some very smart people running the country. And that's something that, you can't say in all Western countries. Hint, hint.
By paying high-level politicians $1 million or more a year, they lower temptation to accept bribes. Singapore has one of the world's 10 lowest rates of corruption. And according to extensive polls by Gallup's Peter Ong, this creates an extraordinary sense of trust and stability despite the harsh laws.
In terms of happiness, people need stability and people need the ability to predict what their lives will look like in a week's time, in a year's time, in 10 years' time.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the happiest, what would you say you are?
Probably 8.
An 8?
Yeah. Around that, 8.
And what would make you happier?
More money.
Ah, yes. Now for the other pillars of Singapore society, the 5 C's.
Cars, cash, credit cards, condominium, and country club.
Selena Lin is a self-made millionaire and one of the nation's best-known bachelorette socialites.
So how many pairs of shoes do you have?
At last count, I have 300 pairs.
300.
Yeah, I need the shoes.
You need them.
But despite her apartment full of arts, her snazzy Porsche, she is the least happy person I'll meet.
Sometimes I get unhappy if I compare. Of course, someone else, will be wealthier, having a more luxurious life, driving a bigger car, having a bigger house.
She's a good example of why Singapore is not quite as happy as less materialistic Denmark. Keeping up with the Joneses is a major source of unhappiness. And this place is so competitive.
Every day, how much time do you spend sleeping?
Kids spend their vacation in seminars on time management. But their drive to earn and spend and impress is tempered by Confucian values. The family always comes first.
This morning, happiness is having breakfast with my 3 grandchildren. 3, 4, 5.
We saw it in Jenny Chua, the former CEO of the famous Raffles Hotel. And in Douglas Fu, one of the most successful restaurateurs in Asia.
You seem very happy. You're the happiest guy I've met.
Really?
In the world, maybe.
Really? Okay, thank you.
His goal is to create a sushi chain as big as Starbucks or McDonald's, just as soon as he's done playing with his kids.
Can you have both? Can you have it both ways?
There are a lot of things I want to do in my life. I want to make sure that by the time I leave, when he calls up and say, now it's the time to go, I will leave smiling and saying that I've lived a very fulfilling, meaningful life.
Our search also begs the question, what about the unhappiest countries on Earth? For obvious reasons, Iraq is near the bottom of the list, but alongside are less violent places like Moldova and Zimbabwe. Poverty is a big reason, but wealthy Italy ranks itself as the unhappiest country in Western Europe, and the common factor is corruption. If organized criminals run your neighborhood, if you can't trust your government, police, or neighbors, happiness is much harder to come by. Now, if you're wondering about the happiest place in America, Eric Weiner scanned the globe for his new book, The Geography of Bliss. And using the lessons learned, he picked Asheville, North Carolina.
You've got the mountains, beautiful mountains all around. You have a tremendous, thriving, artistic community. Every other shop is a coffee shop or a bookstore or something like that.
So social setting.
You have a really strong sense of community here. And if I've learned anything from researching this book, it's that other people matter. There's no such thing as personal happiness. Your happiness is part and parcel of those around you.
So in the end, if you want to find happiness, find the strongest possible community. Community is why contentment can be found along with the high taxes in Denmark, the severe laws in Singapore, and the crushing poverty in India. One study found that people living on the streets of Calcutta are actually happier than those in California, because the homeless in Fresno may have more access to food and shelter, but the houseless in India, they still have each other. Many of life's precious moments come with the popping of corks. Births, weddings, celebrations of all kinds. Well, this is a story about taking hundreds of thousands of these cork memories and creating a new one in grand fashion. It's a celebration of everything we learned tonight about happiness. It's a story about following your bliss.
To happiness.
Once upon a time, there was a little boy who loved boats. Boats that took people on adventures. Kon-Tiki, the Odyssey, Treasure Island. They haunted his dreams and filled his waking imagination.
I always loved boats. I built a boat when I was 6 years old, and I had hammered this boat together out of scraps of lumber, and it had a very short maiden voyage straight down. And I decided, well, why not build a cork boat? Because you can't sink a cork, and we started saving. It became a running joke in our family. Another cork for the boat. To the cork boat and to all of us.
John has the kind of parents who encouraged whimsy and wonder in their kids, and also a sense of roll-up-your-sleeves activism. So as he grew up, John became interested in politics, becoming a speechwriter on Capitol Hill, and eventually writing for President Bill Clinton.
We know now.
But in time, the thrill of big-time politics wore thin, and that whimsical boyhood dream resurfaced.
And I'm kind of getting burnt out on the hill. I'd like to just take a break and do something fun. Why not build the boat?
We got 246.
But to make it real would require a lot of help. He enlisted a boyhood friend, Garth Goldstein.
These are nice.
Now an architect to help design a 22-foot Viking raft with sail, oars, and room for female companionship. They figured they'd need at least 100,000 corks, and since John's family doesn't drink quite that fast, he went begging in just about every bar and restaurant in Washington.
It can be humiliating to walk into a fancy bar and ask some snooty bartender for corks, and he looks down at you and thinks you're a dork. I mean, okay, that might be accurate. But what's life if there isn't whimsy? They'd say, well, what's the issue? What's your agenda? And I'd say, fun. And there was this kind of tangible wave of relief as they thought, oh, fun. Well, I like fun.
Washington's bartenders came through with thousands of corks, and John's family collection now amounted to 70,000. But still, not enough. So John asked one of the world's largest cork manufacturers for a donation, and they said yes. And as all that cork poured in, a friend's back alley garage served as their boat works. And as the boat grew, so did their team of volunteers, pulling countless all-nighters. Finishing the boat became an obsession.
That's what makes it so much fun. You get obsessed with the project, and all of a sudden you don't know that it's been going for 2 years.
That's right, 2 years. Until one day their cork supply benefactor called with an intriguing offer.
He said, how would you like to go to Portugal with the boat and go down the Douro River? And I said, sounds fantastic.
Since Portugal is the source of most of the world's cork, and the Douro Valley is the source of port wine, this would be the perfect setting for the adventure of a lifetime. And a few weeks later, John launched his 2-ton dream under a European sunrise.
Yay! Cork boat!
Their moment of sublime happiness was short-lived. You see, John thought this would be a leisurely 5-day sail to the Atlantic.
You're gonna hit the rudder of the boat.
But uncooperative winds and weak currents turned it into 17 days of back-breaking rowing.
11 kilometers, a new record. A new record.
And how much of it was under sail?
Well, 5 minutes.
John's mom, dad, and a few steadfast friends all flew to Portugal to take turns at the oars.
Joni has gone overboard.
But despite the manual labor, their days were filled with laughter.
Hail to the victors, valiant.
And plenty of interaction with curious locals.
People either get the boat or don't get the boat. And there was something about the Portuguese spirit that the whole country got the boat. And mayors were coming down to greet us as we'd row in haggard to the dock at the end of the day. Sometimes there would be fireworks going off. There might be a group of school kids on a field trip who would come down and were waiting to see the boat. Widows were coming down with bouquets of flowers and packed lunches in the morning.
Before long, they were a bona fide media sensation.
So the whole country started following these crazy Americans who were in this goofy mission. And so when we would walk into any village along the way, people would say, "Cork boat, cork boat."
And as they made their way slowly down the Douro, John learned a few things about happiness.
You get moments of perfection and moments of happiness. I don't know that I've ever been happier. The good things you really got to reach for.
And here we are, arriving at the Atlantic Ocean. Sorry, I'm going to get here.
With dignitaries and a party waiting, the triumphant crew finally arrived in the city of Porto, the end of their journey.
To the cork boat and to all of us.
6 years later, John is back in Washington, but the corks are still popping, and the spirit is still alive in the cork boat crew. And John got one more chance to savor the memory when we flew to Portugal to pull that boat out of the museum where it now lives, a bit faded, but still seaworthy.
Wow, listen to that. You can hear the dog barking and the
Wind
church
blowing.
bell ringing.
It's a long way from Washington.
In the grand pursuit of happiness, I think you were onto something here.
Well, right now, I'm happy. And I think that's the way happiness works, is that you're happy a moment at a time. I think that people just need to have faith in their own dreams. If you trust yourself enough to follow them, that the following them will bring you happiness. Everyone has a cork boat in their life of one sort or another.
How many corks here?
165,321.
You put them back in bottles. You do like a limited edition cork boat vintage.
It's wine.
Wine.
All right, we'll do it if you help drink it.
That's a deal.
Excellent.
That's a deal.
I'm Elizabeth Vargas, and that's our program for tonight, our recipe for happiness soup. But be sure to watch next Friday when we bring you the dramatic transformation of some forgotten women.
They are the soccer moms you would never think have a particular disorder secretly. Do they live next door to you? That's next week. I'm John Stossel, and for all of us at 2020 and ABC News, we're in touch, so you be in touch. Good night.